April 1859. They're called the Hunters of the Alps, aggressive guerrilla fighters who slip into the high peaks, engaging the enemy in wind-chilled villages and mountain passes. And they've come from all across Italy, volunteers, revolutionaries, patriots, to fight a war of liberation. Now, after a protracted standoff, Austria has invaded Piedmont, Sardinia. But these men did not volunteer to fight for King Victor Emmanuel, nor his French allies who have vowed to repulse Austria. No, they came to fight for a man said to perform miracles, like taking off his shirt after battles to shake enemy bullets out, the cloth punctured but his skin unmarked. They come to fight with Garibaldi, and soon 1,000 of them will become legends as well. And speaking of legends, this episode is brought to you by our patrons over on Patreon, who not only help make our extra history videos possible, but also vote to select topics we cover, like the Garibaldi series you're watching right now. Learn how you can get in on that historic action after the episode. Ironically, the Italians themselves played a junior role during the Second War of Italian Unification. The major fighting took place between the French and the Austrians at 2 bloody battles. The first French victory became so famous that a newly developed color was named after it, magenta, while the second proved so inhumane that it inspired the creation of the Red Cross and the Geneva Conventions. But the victorious Napoleon III was so appalled by the losses of life that he brokered immediate peace with Austria, prematurely ending the war against the wishes of Piedmont, Sardinia. But Napoleon III did not care, for he was deeply disappointed with his allies. The Piedmontese army had performed badly, largely due to King Victor Emmanuel II taking personal command. And Napoleon wasn't the only one disappointed with Piedmontese leadership. Garibaldi had joined the army only to find that Victor Emmanuel and Cavour used his reputation to attract volunteers, then skimmed the best recruits for the regular army and sent Garibaldi's guerrilla unit, the Rejects. In truth, the Piedmontese government worried that if Garibaldi performed too well, his cult of personality would be a threat to the dominant positions they wanted once Italy formed. And they were right to worry, because Garibaldi turned those 3,000 rejects into crack Alpine skirmishers, the Hunters of the Alps. He fought only small battles, blocking passes and tying down Austrian troops, but he won. Yet, since Piedmont Sardinia was the junior partner, Napoleon set the peace terms. Piedmont Sardinia annexed Lombardy and was left occupying Tuscany, Parma, and Reggio. Though this effectively made Victor Emmanuel the king of northern Italy, he fell short of his objective to acquire Venice. And due to Cavour's secret arrangement with Napoleon, Cavour did have to give France something it wanted: Savoy, plus Garibaldi's hometown of Nice. This betrayal, deep and personal, made Cavour Garibaldi's lifelong enemy. And his disillusionment did not stop there. Garibaldi's men had expected to be treated like liberators during the war, but he mostly found the people to be hostile to what was, in effect, a Piedmontese takeover. Soon, officials imposed Piedmontese laws and government in the new territory, often sweeping away more liberal regimes. Garibaldi was adrift, angry, and considering leading an uprising in Nice, but he instead went to a different war. For various forces were beginning to circle the idea of an uprising in Sicily, one where Garibaldi could intervene, then go on to capture the entire Kingdom of the Two Sicilies and its capital Naples. Among the greatest proponents of this plan was Mazzini, still in exile, who hoped Garibaldi's arrival could create a liberal republic in the south. Victor Emmanuel also secretly approved, since he believed Garibaldi would give him Sicily after conquering it. Cavour, however, was more nervous. He feared Garibaldi would carry on to Rome and the Papal States, pitting Piedmont Sardinia against its ally Napoleon III, who saw himself as a protector of the papacy. So, when Sicily revolted, and Garibaldi's small flotilla of volunteers landed on the island, he did so with private assurances that he had the king's support, but no official backing from Piedmont Sardinia. In fact, to keep up appearances, their navy was ordered to stop him. Therefore, he didn't have crack troops or modern arms. Instead, he had a force of 1,100 highly motivated guerrillas, the Expedition of the Thousand. Though in truth he had a bit more than that, because the expedition landed on Sicily between 2 British ships that just happened to be there, which prevented Bourbon forces from bombarding them for fear of causing an international incident. This, along with the fact that the expedition was funded by private donations from British supporters, have led to long-term rumors that Britain clandestinely supported Garibaldi. But truly his greatest supporters were the press. Garibaldi embedded journalists in his command, giving generous interviews, sitting for photographs, and occasionally persuading them to act as spies. The 1,000 moved inland, swelling with squads of Sicilian rebels. As he marched for Palermo, Garibaldi gave speeches promising liberal land reforms that would break the power of the Sicilian landlords and an end to the Bourbon regime of unpopular taxes. But the conquest would not be as easy as the landings. At his first engagement, the Bourbon army withdrew to a hill and pinned the pursuing red shirts behind stone walls. Garibaldi then tried to coax a charge, yelling, "Here we make Italy or die!" At which point a rock arced down and thumped Garibaldi in the chest. "They're throwing rocks!" he yelled, changing tactics. "They're almost out of ammunition!" That did it. His red shirts swarmed up the hill into murderous volleys and swirling melee. It was a costly victory, one where even Garibaldi's eldest son Menotti, who escaped soldiers in Brazil as a newborn, was wounded. But it was a victory, because despite possessing vast superiority in numbers and firepower, the Bourbon commanders were incompetent, overcautious old men who'd gained their positions via nepotism. Where Garibaldi couldn't match their numbers, he outmaneuvered them, using the guerrilla tactics he'd perfected in South America and the Alps. And after brutal street fighting and a tense standoff, he secured Palermo. He took it under the title of Dictator, though, greeted at times like a saint, with peasants falling to their knees in his presence or weeping. Yet soon he found tension between his rhetoric and political pragmatism. Garibaldi promised land reforms that never came, and when mobs attacked and killed several rich landowners, he ended up siding with the abusive landlords and had the rebels shot. The rich men would be needed, after all, to assist in the unification with Piedmont. Indeed, though still applauded as a liberal revolutionary among the public and press, Garibaldi increasingly behaved as a knowing agent of the monarchists. Perhaps due to his experiences with the Roman Republic, he had come to believe that a strongman dictator would be needed to unify the country, and that Victor Emmanuel was that man. He would sacrifice his republican dreams on the altar of unification. And to that end, he took his now large force of volunteers across the strait to southern Italy, skillfully outmaneuvering the Bourbon forces, while reportedly using the occasional bribe to clear his path north to Naples. Cavour, ever sneaky, sent a Piedmontese army to support the King of the Two Sicilies against this rogue commander, only to reveal at the last minute that he was there to support Garibaldi, not arrest him. By the time Garibaldi took the Bourbon capital and ejected its king, his force was 20,000 strong, and he was one of the most famous men in Europe. At this point, he could have, theoretically, declared himself ruler and become King of the South. But he did not. Instead, Garibaldi held a highly suspect popular vote in Naples on whether to join Piedmont. The motion passed. Afterwards, Garibaldi met Victor Emmanuel on horseback. The two shook hands, the general symbolically transferring his power over southern Italy to the monarch. Then Garibaldi went home to his farm. He was there, watching from afar, when Victor Emmanuel declared the Kingdom of Italy in 1861. Oddly enough, that same year, Garibaldi also declined an offer from Abraham Lincoln to take up a major command in the Union Army. They couldn't agree on terms. But Garibaldi did not disappear, for Italy was not yet complete. Venice and the Papal States were still to be won. So in 1863, when a popular movement declared that Italians would seize Rome under the motto, "Rome or Death," he gathered 2,000 volunteers and marched on the city. There they were met, ironically, by the Italian army, under orders to shield the Pope. While Garibaldi told his volunteers not to fire on fellow Italians, his fellow Italians fired on him. Wounded in the ankle and briefly arrested, he was allowed to return home. Yet he'd emerge 3 more times despite increasing age. Once as a commander in the Third War of Unification, then in another failed attempt to capture Rome, and finally in the Franco-Prussian War. But truly, these struggles were footnotes. For in the end, Rome and Venice were won for Italy via political maneuverings and negotiations, not bayonets. In his last days, his vision of Italy fulfilled, he asked the nurse that he'd, recently married, to put him at the window where he could look at the sea as his vision faded. He had made a nation but lost his homeland, preached liberal values yet empowered monarchists, been both a rebel and dictator. Truly, a hero of two worlds. He was Garibaldi. And of course, I have been your narrator, Matt, managed by our fur boss Zoe here, and we, along with the entire Extra History team, are supported by our wonderful patrons over on Patreon. Right, Zozo? Yeah! Seriously, releasing weekly animated historical shows takes a lot of people and resources, and without your generosity and financial support, this show simply wouldn't exist. And I wouldn't be, basically getting my beard attacked all the time, but you know, you win some, you lose some. Of course, we'd love to give back to our patrons with things like early videos, access to our Discord, 4K wallpapers for every episode and more. But I think the thing we're the most proud of is actually that we get to listen to our patrons directly and involve them in our topic selection process. For real, like, patrons are why you got to watch this Garibaldi series you just saw. And actually, in a few weeks, you're going to be getting a 5-parter on Nazi occultism, and it is just a wild series. Rob and Allie knocked it out of the park, and I'm super psyched that you all picked it. So if you want to support our shows and help keep the history flowing, click here to become a patron now, and then once you've checked out all the perks, watch another of our videos here. Once upon a time, Angelo Valenciana, Arcalite Games, Dominic Valenciana, Foxdoc, Hunter Z, Izzy Coin, Joseph Blame, and Kuya Koi were the best legendary patrons. That time is now, by the way.